Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar and I am thrilled to have board-certified neurosurgeon and visionary founder of ReCELLebrate, Dr. Jeff Gross, with us today. Dr. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yes, I cannot wait to pick your brain on this revolutionary cancer treatment. I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Jeff before we get started, and then we'll jump right into our questions. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Jeff Gross is a board-certified neurosurgeon and the visionary founder of ReCELLebrate, a cutting-edge regenerative medicine clinic that bridges the gap between traditional medicine and cellular innovation. After decades in conventional neurosurgery, Dr. Gross transitioned into the frontier of stem cell and exosome therapies, becoming a pioneering figure in the use of activated natural killer cell-derived exosomes for cancer treatment and immune optimization. He is one of only a handful of specialists in the world with access to these potent exosomes, tiny biological messengers that are revolutionizing oncology and longevity science. By selectively eliminating cancer and senescent zombie cells while preserving healthy tissue. At ReCELLebrate, Dr. Gross blends personalized precision medicine with breakthrough biologics to help patients not only survive, but thrive beyond diagnosis, restoring vitality and extending health span. Oh my goodness. So, you've done a little in your career, I can see.
I don't know who that guy is, but he sounds like a real nerd to me.
Yeah, he's really, really nerdy. Oh my gosh, Dr. Gross. Seriously, this is some really exciting stuff. On this podcast, we always love to talk about inspiration, what brought you into this field. So before you became a pioneer in regenerative medicine, you were an established neurosurgeon. Share more about that personal journey and the professional journey and what ultimately inspired you to shift into stem cell and exosome-based therapies.
Well, stumble is right. It was somewhat accidental, but I attribute the reason for the journey, the transition, was my patients. I was, one of the first spine fellowship trained neurosurgeons in Southern California for many years, and in Orange County and beyond. And what we have in the spine for treatments is very limited. We have therapy, we have time, we have anti-inflammatories, we have injections like epidural injections, for example. And then we have surgery, which is a big jump from all those other things, right? Because the surgeries are sometimes pretty big and open, not all of them. But it had always been my goal to only do surgery on the people that absolutely had to have it. So there were these basket of patients that weren't ready for surgery, great, but also weren't getting the results from those other non-surgical treatments. And they were kind of caught in that gap, if you will. And they would come to me and say, well, I still got the pain. I can't play racquetball. I can't do this. I can't do that. But I'm not ready for surgery. What else you got, doc? You got crystals. You got, lasers, you got stem cells, what do you got for me, doc? So chance favors the prepared mind. And luckily in my undergraduate days, a few years back, I might say, I studied molecular biology and biochemistry, which is really the stem cell field. And I know a lot had happened in those years. I followed the Christopher Reeves story and the research at that, the facilities that were sponsored by a lot of the donations that went into that thereafter. And I said, you know what? It's been a while. And I loved that topic back then. I just got so busy becoming a neurosurgeon and doing that kind of thing. So I went back one year, and instead of going to the annual neurosurgery meetings where the same guys pat themselves on the back for doing the same thing that was done 20 years and 40 years and 60 years ago, I, I open-mindedly, you know, put the Kool-Aid down and I went to these meetings and I started learning about stem cells again and what has happened in regenerative medicine. Stem cells, stem cell derived exosomes, PRP, natural killer cells, all these things. And it was sort of a reawakening, and I got reinterested in these things and started retraining, re-educating, and applying this for my spine patients. But it has blossomed into so much more than that, that I do spine as just something that comes often and easy to me. And everything else is really, really interesting now. So that's sorry, the long version, if you will.
Okay, so you just rattled off a bunch of other things besides exosomes, and I know what PRP is, but can you explain just a little bit more so people are understanding
Yeah,
the, stem cell types of therapies? And then let's really just talk about exosomes.
right.
What are they and how are they used?
Well, I wanted to include the whole basket of regenerative medicine when I was mentioning that, so people understood where this fit. We have PRP, which is the low end, which is from your own blood. We have stem cells, which can come from your body and from someone else's body, a donor. But we've learned that the work of stem cells, in fact, of any cell, but particularly of stem cells in this category, the business end of stem cells come from these smaller cell to cell communicating factors called exosomes. And what we really mean is stem cell derived vesicles, smaller particles, smaller even than cells by about 1,000th. These small communicating particles are doing the work of the stem cells. So if I gave you stem cells today in your vein, you came in and said, I'd like some stem cells, please. And we put some in your vein for whatever reason we decide, they'd be gone out of your body in 10 to 14 days. But the benefits would last longer, and perhaps some of them even permanently. And why is that? Because those stem cells have delivered to you their communicative, activating messages to your cells, and your cells do the work. And that's what's so cool about regenerative medicine is we're tapping back into your own natural biology. So for short, we call these stem cell derived exosomes. We call them just exosomes. When we refer to exosomes, we're really referring to the stem cell ones. And then aside from that, we have some even more fancier ones that have come up very recently. That's the natural killer cell derived exosomes.
So explain that to me. And just so I help our listeners, PRP is platelet rich plasma, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about the natural killer exosomes. And then I want to ask you maybe a little bit of controversial questions after that.
Okay, great. We like those. They're interesting.
Mhm.
Well, natural killer cells are a part of our immune system, right? Our white blood cells. And probably less than 5% of our immune system is made up of these cells. So of your blood, it's even a smaller percentage of your entire blood because we have red cells in there too, and platelets and other things. So it's a very, very small percentage of our system. And as part of our natural surveillance and security system, these cells go throughout the body and naturally kill, naturally remove abnormal cells that we're not supposed to have, like cancer cells. And yes, during our lifetime, we make accidental cancer cells, but this system removes them selectively and they never become a problem until they do, right?
Mhm.
And they also remove these natural killer cells, remove senescent cells. Senescent cells are cells that have duplicated a number of times, completed their job, but they're hanging around. They're big and bloated and boggy. They leak, kind of pro-inflammatory chemical communicators, and they take up resources, but they're not contributing to the cause. So they're an aged cell population. And the more you remove them, the more youthful your cells are, and therefore the more youthful you are. And that's why people sort of tend to age biologically at different rates.
Mm.
Well, it turns out that people with cancer are found at that time to have a lower number and lower function of their natural killer cell system. Now, I
Mm.
didn't say that as a cause, but it's certainly at least a correlation. So
Mhm.
you reduce your ability to remove cells, and then they win. They can
Mhm.
form a tumor, they can circulate, what have you. So it turns out that you can give back to someone some enhanced natural killer cells, but just like the stem cell story, you can also just give them the natural killer cell mechanism, which are the exosomes. And those
Mhm.
exosomes are very special. They carry enzymes in them that identify and go into abnormal cells, cancer cells, senescent cells,
Mm.
aka zombie cells, and they degrade them, they remove them, they kill them selectively. They do not harm normal cells. They do not appear to have side effects. And this is an off the shelf kind of groundbreaking, either augmentative thing we can do for people for cancer care to help them with maybe stay in remission if they're at high risk. Maybe they have a BRCA gene problem, maybe something they've had cancer, they want to stay in remission. Maybe they want to bolster their immune system in between cycles. Maybe they're looking for a natural alternative. And then there is evidence, there is research that shows if you give NK cells, natural killer cells for short, or the exosomes, you can actually reduce the age-related markers from the senescent cells. So it has potential for longevity assistance and preventative.
Yeah. Yes, and we're definitely going to get into that a lot more in the second half of this podcast. But I did want to touch on controversy. There was so much political turmoil and, questions and controversy regarding stem cells. Where are we at now?
Yeah, the controversy is controverted, meaning it's only inserted to create this narrative, and it's probably coming from those who have everything to lose when people figure out how good regenerative medicine can be for us, because our bodies have been using it all the time. And who are those people? Well, they're big pharma and the political arm that's kind of bought and sold by big pharma, big implant companies, because we do a lot of joint and spine care with regenerative medicine, and people that sell metallic knee implants and spinal hardware don't want it out there, that there are lots of other options that'll significantly take a bite out of those income into those corporate incomes. So there's no controversy. The studies, the science is behind this. In the US, we are behind the times. They've had this in Europe and in Asia for 20 years plus. So it's here, it's working, the science is behind it. We have evidence-based medicine, and it's just late. We're late to the party.
Wow. And why? Why are we late? Is it because of these kind of financial interests? That's the only reason why? And I think they've also tapped into a certain population that has protests that are religious
No, I
based.
don't think that those the embryonic myth is that these come from aborted fetuses and things like that. There's actually nothing I've ever seen to support that. So our donor sources are highly regulated by the FDA. They go through a rigorous screening process. These are mothers who are delivering by planned C-section. They're screened in the early trimesters. They are on prenatal vitamins. They are not drinking, smoking, drugs. They have one romantic partner only during their pregnancy. They are not COVID vaccinated. And that's not a political statement, although it could be. What it really means is we're just not sure. So why take the risk right now of what that could impact? So this is a very regulated and proper process. It is moral, it is ethical, and anything you might hear to the contrary is, again, part of that narrative that certain people don't want this to flourish at the rate it seems to be flourishing.
Wow, that's such a shame because it just seems like this is so promising for so many people. I mean, cancer is just one of the highest rated diseases in the world, and we have not had, I think, effective therapies, especially in the US for a long time. But you're saying that it's been used in Europe and Asia for a long time. And is that where the bulk of the science
Yes,
backing this comes
absolutely.
from? Which countries are using this the most?
Well, I'd say China and Korea are way ahead of us. South Korea,
Oh, wow.
they are pushing the envelope. We can't barely keep up with them. In
Mhm.
fact, a year ago we did not have the natural killer cells and natural killer cell exosomes here in the U.S. So the two locations where they were available were in parts of Europe and in China. And I had been communicating with different labs, seeing where we could be the first to obtain them. So finally,
Mhm.
we were able to get them from Europe.
And the body will take them even if they're not made endogenously?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, exosomes are fairly neutral to the body. They're naive. They don't have the type of cell markers or surface markers to identify themselves as foreign. They don't need to be matched, if you will. In fact,
Mm.
stem cells don't require that either. They have a few more markers on them, but they are also immunoprivileged or immunomodulatory, meaning the immune system welcomes them in. Since they haven't been assigned a job yet, they're fairly neutral.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, I'm going to ask you some more questions about that. But first, I really want to find out from you. You said that a lot of people with cancer have lower levels of these NK cells.
Right.
What are some of the reasons that you know of in terms of science as to why people with cancer may have fewer of those NK cells? Is it genetic? Is it environmental? Is it diet?
I feel that based on what I've read in scientifically and what I've seen, that genetics probably does not play a large role. That this is mostly what we call epigenetic or
Mhm.
affecting the genes, and that includes inflammatory exposure to the world, so diet, nutrition, supplementation, sleep, hormesis, which for those listeners if you haven't heard that word, it means a slight stress on the body's cells to build resilience, like fasting or
Mhm.
circadian feeding or hot sauna or cold plunge or high intensity exercise, and also exercise in general, and mindfulness, and just reducing stress in general. So all of these things play a role in how fast our body is exposed to inflammation in the world. It creates its own inflammation, and this, we really mean chronic inflammation. So this
Mhm.
is the smoldering pro-oxidation rusting of the body's cells, and it damages them, and it's really related to aging, and perhaps why we age at different rates, and
Mhm.
why we are supposed to avoid you know too many electromagnetic fields and things like that, because that affects our stem cell activity, our regular cell activity, and in our natural killer cell activity also. So I have a feeling the same things that affect people and their rates of cancer affect people and their function and numbers of natural killer cells and of stem cells in general.
Why do you think that the majority of messaging out there in terms of cancer focuses on genetics when we have really seen through science that it is epigenetically oriented? We still see this so often in the media that, it's, oh, if you have, a mother with breast cancer, you should go ahead and, you know, remove your breasts just in case this will be turned on, when we know that something else has to turn the cancer on. It's not
Yeah.
the genes themselves.
Well, there are oncogenes, right? These are cancer genes, and they do create a risk factor for cancer, right? Like I mentioned earlier, BRCA. There are many others. Some of them are virally inserted. But
Mhm.
if you had a more active natural killer cell, you might be able to remove those activated oncogenes when they pop up, right?
Mhm.
The multiple hit hypothesis, where you have one gene that's questionable and then another mutation comes along, and a lot of those mutations are caused by epigenetic factors, environmental factors.
Mhm.
So I think epigenetics is our one thing we can do to influence, mitigate the risk of cancer, and really make a difference, because you can't change your genes that easily. Now we now have technology to change your genes, but we're learning more about it and how to do it safely, and it's the regenerative medicine stuff, I think, is more natural and probably easier to apply at this juncture than gene therapy for cancer, although it's coming, and it's coming fast.
Mm. Well, can you give our listeners an idea of, in terms of diet? This is my area that I'm really interested in, diet and nutrition. What are the, kind of inflammatory foods that you might know in the research that contribute more and more to cancer? And we also know alcohol plays a big
Yeah,
role as well.
is probably one of the most pro-inflammatory toxins of sorts that we all are exposed to, refined sugar specifically. Now if you have some type of poor response or allergic response to other food items like gluten, then yes, if you have gluten in that setting, you are going to stimulate your inflammatory system, and then you have all these sort of, you know, your cell activities are in fighting that inflammation, and not in normal maintenance and surveillance, which is really what you want.
Hmm. I have actually read a lot about animal protein. being, a great contributor to cancer proliferation. What have you read in terms of that?
Yeah, and I know I listened to a podcast of yours earlier today, and I heard you talk about a guest with that. I am a fan of animal protein. What I'm not a fan of is animal proteins that have been eating, grain, that have been eating grains with pesticides,
Mhm.
or not taken care of in a very natural and organic way, or injected with hormones, or processed in brine or something like that. So a lot of the chicken, for example. So
Mhm.
we need protein. We are carnivores. We are nitrogen-based life forms with a carbon exoskeleton. So we're not carbon-based. We're really nitrogen-based. Without nitrogen, we're nothing, just like plants. So
Mhm.
we need our protein, and it's very difficult for vegetarians and vegans to get high quality, diverse branched chain amino acid proteins. They have to really work at it.
Well, I think I would probably disagree in certain areas. And I think that the research done by T. Colin Campbell, what we're seeing from Caldwell Esselstyn, what we're seeing from Dr. Dean Ornish, in terms of cancer proliferation in general, when people do drastically reduce, not necessarily even eliminate, but have about 5 to 10% of their protein coming from animal sources and the rest coming from plant sources, we see a lot fewer cases of cancer. So I think maybe it's an in between place, not a one or the
I would
other.
I would agree with that. I think that's fair. I think this, I've seen some of those studies, and they do speak to the pro-inflammatory nature of protein in animals and animal meat, but some of those meat consumptions weren't controlled by where they got the meat and what type of meat. So we're going to have to do a better job of studying that to really know the how it's done right.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that T. Colin Campbell's research was done in rural China, where they did not have some of the difficulties that we have with big agriculture here. So I think it really, in terms of his science, comes down to the protein itself and the amount that is in our diet. But certainly what you mentioned, diet, inflammation, sleep, stress, a lack of mindfulness, those kinds of things, not being in alignment with your circadian rhythm, all of that contributes to inflammation. So we should be looking at it on the whole. And certainly, people want to try to avoid cancer. They should really look at inflammation in general in their bodies, correct?
Agreed, 100%.
Yes. So, your work highlights that exosomes can eliminate zombie or senescent cells. And I know you talked about it somewhat, but go into a little bit more as to why these zombie cells are so harmful to our health.
Well, they are basically just a source of inflammation. So they're abnormal to ourselves internally. We're supposed to clear them out through a process where the cells die and the parts get recycled. That's called apoptosis.
Mhm.
But some cells are able to, evade that system, and they sneak around, sit on your couch eating potato chips. And they take up your nutrients and they put back inflammation into the system. So you got to get rid of them any way you can. There are other ways to get rid of them, just to be clear. You can fast, you can exercise. These are other ways. There are other supplements and nutrients that support their removal, other phytonutrients.
Mhm.
But NK cells are notoriously good for removing these, and that's been demonstrated through these age-related markers, which are senescent cell enzymes. I can't remember, one of the galactosidase enzymes was looked at. It could persist if you have a natural killer cell infusion. They can persist. The benefits persist for up to 2 years. In some cases,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And just to let me know too, is this effective for all types of cancer or is it more effective in certain types of cancers?
Well, we're not allowed to make any claims yet because the FDA has not approved any marketing claims for what's effective. But the science and the research shows that many different types of cancer, both in humans, in animals, and also in petri dishes in vitro,
Mhm.
um, both injected into solid tumors and just in the fluid in the petri dish or in the circulating blood of the animal or human, has shown to remove various different kinds of tumor cells. One of the
Mhm.
beauties of these exosomes is they travel through the solid tumors better. So maybe there's a day where you don't have a mastectomy, right? You have some other localized treatment that's injected.
Yeah.
And And then you also have an intravenous to catch any circulating cells to help prevent, tumor spreading or setting up somewhere else. That's really the concept here.
That's amazing. It's localized, direct, much less invasive. This is incredible. Well, we are going to delve more into this and delve into longevity science, which is so interesting to me. All of this is so interesting. But we're out of time for this half of this episode. So thank you so much, Dr. Jeff, for coming onto this half, and you'll be joining us for the second half.
My pleasure, of course.
Yes, so tune in next time for the second half of this amazing episode with board-certified neurosurgeon and the visionary founder of ReCELLebrate, Dr. Jeff Gross. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.